How's it going guys, Chris here, and in this one we're going to be checking out all the different bosses in Chapter 5 of Black Myth Wukong. So pretty much right near the start of Chapter 5, you'll be thrown headfirst into a chaotic battle between a bunch of bull soldiers and revenants. Slap bang in the middle of the fray is the pale axe Stalwart leading the charge. He's not actually one of the Destined One's enemies, but being blinded by red, he still gets a bit carried away with the fight, and ends up treating you in the same way as those revenants, probably due to your smaller size. You'd be best taking care of all the other enemies, cluttering up the combat zone first, and then shifting focus to the pale axe Stalwart when they're all out of the way, unsurprisingly being the toughest opponent in the bunch. He might be a beefy dude, but that massive pole axe is definitely compensating for his puny health pool, being a boss that can be wiped out fairly quickly, with or without the use of spells and abilities. Obviously, that swinging weapon can still hit pretty hard if you're not careful, with the Stalwart's attacks being slow but powerful. Though the fight's going to end before you wipe him out completely, probably for his own good. Now being an ally, and someone you can have little chats with. Also giving you the memo on the evil cart monsters blocking off several routes all around the mountain. One of those cart monsters is literally just up the hill along your path, being the thing that was spewing out all those fireballs during your fight with the Stalwart, essentially trolling you both from a nearby ledge. This is the first cart you'll come up against and probably the weakest of the lot, sat in the middle of a narrow walkway obstructing the way forwards. This fight plays out in a very different way to most of the others, with the boss being a stubborn thing that doesn't actually move around, choosing to just chill out in a fixed position and blast you with fire plumes from a distance. Those attacks might be limited and fairly simplistic, but they can still be punishing nevertheless, especially with them also inflicting burn damage, which chews away at your health even further after connecting. Getting up close to whack the beast around can obviously be risky business too, with the cart slamming its arms and blasting you with those flames, forcing you to keep rushing in and retreating to dish out some damage in between its strikes. I definitely advise using the fireproof mantle to nullify that flamethrower, and just keep attacking from the sides to literally get out of the cart's line of fire. Just beyond the height of Ember Shrine, a big lump of a creature's gonna vault over a nearby wall. This is the Father of Stones, a weird looking rock deity seen carrying the skeleton of a girl it befriended back in the past. It doesn't want to befriend you though, instantly becoming hostile as it plods forwards to attack. The Father of Stones is all brawn and no brains, solely relying on its strength and weight, typically choosing to jump about the place, slam into the ground, and even attempt to turn you into a chair. But probably the most notable thing the Father of Stones does is roar into the air to produce shockwaves, which might not seem very destructive, but it's still a very useful, if not slightly annoying tool, to disrupt your flow of combat, ruining your combos while allowing the boss to stagger you constantly throughout the fight. It doesn't really have many ways to hit you over distance, being more of a passive-aggressive boss that strikes the hardest when you're rushing in to take it on. With that said, it doesn't exactly have tons of health, despite being such a bulky creature, and therefore shouldn't be too tricky to deal with, giving you plenty of damage-dealing opportunities in between its attacks. You don't need to travel too far before the next giant cart monster appears to cause you some trouble, sat at the bottom of a ravine, launching those molten rock balls at you from a distance, just like the last one. After navigating through a series of dark tunnels along a winding route down to the bottom, you'll eventually come face to face with the grey bronze cart, looking very similar to the first cart boss, also blocking off the path forwards but squashed in an even tighter space. It's another big flamethrower spewing fire plumes through that narrow canyon, and having barely any room to avoid those attacks, you'll need to try and seek refuge by squishing into the small gaps along the walls, rushing forwards to slap the cart around when it's done blasting you with flames, only to retreat back to safety when it's about to unleash another deadly scorch attack. Once again, that fireproof mantle is going to come in very handy for this fight, and you'll also need to be prepared for the grey bronze cart smashing you around with close range slams, being almost the same as the brown iron cart but in a much more awkward place, which makes you even more vulnerable to taking damage. It shouldn't take too much effort to get rid of this stubborn boss though, allowing you to push on through the area. Pretty much right after defeating the grey bronze cart, you'll literally be thrown head first into another boss battle, after finding a mysterious fox girl captured by a nearby snare. This is the first of several boss duos you'll face over the Flaming Mountains region, with a pair of giant head monsters storming into the scene. A floating dude with a load of hair and tusks called Fast as Wind, along with a big bold fire-spitting bloke called Quick as Fire. They're both just about as evil as they look, and they're going to attempt to take you on together using different attacks to one another. Their names sort of hint at what you can expect from their attacks and fighting styles. Fast as Wind mainly strikes with tornadoes and gusts, while Quick as Fire basically acts like a big flaming bowling ball, rolling around the arena, smashing into you, while leaving hazardous fire trails around in its wake. Having two bosses to think about at once will definitely test your multitasking skills and spatial awareness, as neither of them are particularly tough on their own, but combining their efforts gives you twice as much stuff to dodge, which is why I'd probably advise taking out Quick as Fire first to prevent him from being a nuisance while you're trying to hit Fast as Wind, who's generally much more awkward to hit due to him hovering around in the air. Despite the name, Quick as Fire will spend huge parts of the fight just sitting around, being wide open to your heavy staff attacks and combos. And once he's out of the way, you can focus all of your attention on the other guy, making the rest of the battle much more simplistic, with you now not having to worry about stepping into all that bloody fire. Speaking of stepping into fire, our next boss is a bit of a secretive one that's very easy to miss, due to him being found in a pond of lava. After pushing down the path from the valley entrance shrine, turning left into a pool of magma at the bottom might not exactly seem like a great idea at first, what with one of the golden rules in video games being to always avoid lava. But you're not going to instantly burst into a puff of smoke like you've come to expect, and by using the fireproof mantle, you'll be able to run across it without taking any damage at all. You'll just need to avoid all the rock enemies on your way through though. Eventually you'll be met by the Flint Chief, a much bigger, nastier rock enemy who's going to use all the typical slamming and swiping attacks you've come to expect from rock bosses, only with this guy causing molten rocks to shoot out from the floor and launching fiery projectiles over a short distance. The effects of the fireproof mantle aren't going to last forever, and so you can expect to get burnt a lot during this fight, possibly being a nice incentive to get it over with as quick as you can. And probably the best way to do that is by targeting the boss's gangly arms after it smashes its hands down, even letting you rip them off completely if they sustain enough damage. That said, it shouldn't really take too long to turn this thing back into rubble. The next boss battle is going to be another duel effort, against a pair of wacky creatures called Cloudy Mist and Misty Cloud. Despite sounding like a pair of drag artists, these two can actually be a bit of a pest to deal with, and they're probably going to be trickier bosses than the last duo, working more like a tag team, taking turns to hit you with alternating attack styles. Cloudy Mist is essentially a body shared by three ghosts, combining their powers to shoot lasers and projectiles at you over range, with most of its attacks hitting you from a distance. Whereas Misty Cloud is a blind mountain deity who prefers to rush in with shorter range flame-based melee strikes, attacking with more aggression close by. They'll keep switching around, vanishing and reappearing, typically hitting you with their specialised movesets, while the other one waits until it's their turn. Though they become much more awkward to read when they combine their attacks together, occasionally helping each other out by throwing a mixed combo at you, featuring both long and short range surprises. Once you've defeated one of the bosses though, the other one's not going to get any assistance anymore, making the rest of the fight a lot easier, no longer having access to their deadliest moves. It doesn't really matter who you take care of first either, as neither of them are going to be quite as effective on their own. After making your way through the Rakshasa Palace and reaching the Emerald Hall, you'll run into the Keeper of Flaming Mountains, a deceitful Taoist who's mastered the ability to conjure minions using Yin-Yang powers. You'll be taken to a mystical realm with the fight taking place on a monochrome pond, aided by Zubadier at the beginning as you both try and hunt the Taoist down, while he hovers around launching orbs and firing projectiles. He's not going to be alone during the battle, being able to summon Yin-Yang Revenant enemies which wear away at your health with clubs and arrows, while the Keeper of Flaming Mountains takes a little break. Those enemies might seem a bit basic for an epic boss battle, but don't worry, because he's also going to summon the big horse Guai Matiamba, a character you'll have met in the past, whose soul has been captured and weaponized to fight against you. Matiamba's armed with long deadly whip that can be thrashed around quickly, but generally he's not exactly a very tough opponent, despite looking like he probably should be. Most of his lashing attacks aren't too awkward to avoid, and he's not really got too much health to wipe away. Defeating the horse Guai will bring the Keeper of Flaming Mountains back into the scene, and this is going to kick off the second phase of the fight, where he drops a teeny little yin-yang fish into the water, which very quickly grows into a giant monster, looking like something Jeremy Wade would probably chase after. Now this is where things start to get a bit more interesting, with the yin-yang fish sort of taking over the rest of the fight, throwing a load of new moves into the mix as it quickly swims around in the inky pool below. Prepare to get slapped by that tail, belly flopped from afar, and splashed by a load of black and white projectiles, not only flapping around in the water like a distressed Magikarp, but even floating off into the sky to rain death on you from above, an attack that can be really devastating if you get hit by it early on. The Yin-Yang fish still uses some similar powers to the Keeper of Flaming Mountains, but relies more so on agility rather than cheeky teleportation tricks. Though being such a large target to hit should at least make it easier to deal damage towards, and once you've beaten the big fish, the Keeper's going to end the illusion and vanish, putting you back into that Emerald Hall, left to continue along the path ahead. Another cart monster is waiting for us at the top of all the steps in the next area, though the Crimson Silver cart isn't like the other two, which just sat around acting like giant fire-breathing obstacles, as this one will actually move around independently, spending a lot of its time trying to run you over as it rushes around, often charging in your direction. This fight is more like a traditional boss battle, and it's going to seem a lot more aggressive as a result, though the cart creature's still going to use a lot of similar attacks to the others, also being a big fiery beast that enjoys spewing flames all over the place, with its pair of arms smashing down on you from the front, only now being able to reposition itself for maximum effect. It doesn't really matter what angle you choose to tackle the boss, it can still hit you regardless using fire bursts and ramming strikes, rapidly flinging itself towards you or reversing backwards to crush you into the soil. With that said, the Crimson Silver cart really doesn't like having its backside slapped, seeming to take extra damage from behind. So you should make it your mission to keep flanking around the boss's sides and focus all of your attacks on where it really hurts, so also keeping you away from those slamming hands, along with that dreaded flamethrower phase. The next boss battle is really easy to find, just chill out in a small clearing right next to the Ashen Pass Free Shrine. There's a couple of mushrooms to be foraged here, though one of them is noticeably a lot bigger and redder. Plucking this from out of the ground will reveal another plant-based opponent for us to battle, with the 9-capped Lingzhi Guai popping out from under the rocky floor, waving its medieval-looking spiked mace. You can expect most of the creature's attacks to come in the form of that mace, with the Lingzhi Guai leaping around the place, swinging it around, and using a variety of deadly combos against you. But this boss is a lot more mischievous than it first might appear, and the real problem you'll face probably won't be the weapon itself, but the small fungi it produces after making contact, which spreads out all over the ground, bursting into red spores to encase you, allowing tiny mushrooms to grow all over your body, drastically slowing down your movements while dealing poison damage. Definitely not an ideal combo. This makes an otherwise simple fight a lot more awkward, applying 2 nasty handicaps at once, constantly having to combat the effects of those mushrooms during the battle. And to make matters worse, it also likes to casually lob its hat at you over distance, instantly putting you under that fungi effect, with you now having to wear the creature's cap as your own. Mushroom Oddjob mainly wears you down with those spores and its effects, as otherwise is a fairly basic boss that acts in a similar way to the standard Lingzhi enemies. By wandering off the beaten path beyond the Ashen Pass Free Shrine, you'll find a new route that holds a series of secret bosses called the Cooling Slope. The only problem is, you'll first need to venture right the way past this area and double back in yourself, due to a massive spiky ball rampaging through the area. Once it's gone though, you'll be able to find a clearing with a pile of smouldering boulders scattered around. But lo and behold, that pile of smouldering boulders is actually our next boss, the Flint Vanguard, reassembling to form an evil rock monster, which ambushes you with a load of its buddies. The Flint Vanguard is kinda similar to the Stone Vanguard in Chapter 2, only being a molten rock variant. Not exactly a brutal boss on its own, but having a bunch of other rock guys ganging up on you at the same time is definitely going to make it a much more chaotic experience. Obviously they're all going to batter you with attacks from different angles, so it's definitely best to take out all the smaller enemies first before taking on the big guy, as it's going to be a really tough fight otherwise, having to dodge everything that gets thrown your way. The Flint Vanguard itself likes to spray lava around during its pommel attacks, jumping around and stomping the floor to deliver crushing blows, firing molten rocks from range, generally making the area much more hazardous. Lava pools can form on the floor, and you'll be open to getting burnt by a lot of its attacks, even some of its melee strikes. Though apart from it being a bit annoying at the start, having to deal with all those minions, the Flint Vanguard can easily be worn down with spells and abilities, and shouldn't really be too tricky to manage on its own. Now you're on the Cooling Slope path, you'll be able to find a whole host of other enemies and bosses along it. Though to summon the next one, you'll first need to snuff out a few Flamlings, collect 4 flame ores by doing so, and then deliver them to the glowing patch on the floor just ahead. This will cause the Mother of Flamlings to pop out, being a much bigger, nastier variant than her smaller counterparts. She's much more likely to burn you to a crisp, using a variety of range attacks, from fireballs to flame breath, also sending out molten lava spheres that float around and lock onto your position. Fortunately, the boss is stuck in a fixed position, unable to wander around. Though unfortunately, just like in the last fight against the Flint Vanguard, she's also not alone either, often joined by a bunch of her offspring during the fight, who complement her attacks by lighting the place up with even more fireballs and flames, making this an extra hot battle by setting the arena ablaze. For this reason, that fireproof mantle is, once again, going to be a very useful thing to have at your disposal, nullifying that burn damage, thus making the battle a bit less heated. There's a hell of a lot of stuff that comes flying your way in this one, including some random meteor showers, so expect to spend a fair bit of time dodging airborne projectiles, along with clearing the place from the Mother of Flamlings' pesky spawn. So by venturing further down the cooling slope, we'll be able to find the last elemental cart, though it's only going to appear if you've done a few other tasks first. You'll need to keep chatting to the pale-axe Stalwart. You'll first stand around in the area where you defeated him near the start, and then you'll be able to find him in the area where you took on the Crimson Silver cart, waiting to have another chat. Or possibly wait to assist you in defeating the boss, if you've already spoke to him in the first area. A secret crash cart can be interacted with in the Furnace Valley area, on the opposite side of the Flint Chief fight. You'll just need to wipe out a bunch of enemies before that though. And then by returning to the Cooling Slope Shrine, the fifth and final rusty gold cart will come charging out from the gates ahead. See him munching on the pale-axe Stalwart, spitting him out and leaving him for dead. The rusty gold cart is easily the meanest one of the lot, sort of acting like a beefed up version of the Crimson Silver cart, using quite a lot of similar attacks, along with a few nasty tricks of its own. It's also got a ton of health and a lot of mobility too, quickly rolling around the place trying to mow you down, making it even riskier for you to run in and lash out with your staff combos. But just like with the other cart boss, this thing doesn't like having its ass smacked either, with its back acting as a bit of a weak spot, taking quite a lot of punishment from those focus charge strikes. Being more aggressive than the other carts, expect the rusty gold cart's attacks to dish out more damage, and devastate your health bar at a faster rate, as it waves its arms around and scorches the living crap out of you in close range. Not the easiest battle in the world, but still very doable with all your spells and combat knowledge, with Immobilize being a really handy tool for holding the cart in place, while you rush around the back to maximise your damage output. This is definitely a boss you'll want to defeat, as it will complete the cart quest line and open up Bishui Cave, a new secret area with 3 more bosses to discover. You're probably waiting for another big frog boss to pop up somewhere in this video, and this is the exact point where it does, as walking through the gates of Bishui Cave will take us to a huge dark room, and waiting for us on the left side of it is Baw-Lang-Lang. And if the rest of the chapter is anything to go by, you probably won't be too surprised to hear that this is the Pyro variant, with a lot of its attacks being infused with fire and lava, many of which inflict burn damage. Expect all the typical moves from the giant frogs in the other chapters, only with this one creating flame puddles and fire explosions as it strikes, making the area much more dangerous as the fight progresses, with elemental damage eating away at your health bar as you constantly have to dive out of the way of the frogs' pounces and projectiles. Baw-Lang-Lang is basically a bouncing furnace, launching that tongue at you over range to ignite you pretty much instantly. But it's not a boss that you really need to worry about, using a lot of moves that you'll probably be familiar with. And with that health pool being on the smaller side, it'll probably be a fairly easy fight compared to a lot of the others. Aggression is very effective here. After being transported to a new area and wandering down the path beyond the Purge Pit Shrine, a huge spiky ball is going to come rolling down into the area, which is actually being controlled by a pair of Yakshas, splitting the ball into 2 and emerging from the inside to take you on. This is yet another multi-boss battle, with you having to face both the Guais, top takes bottom and bottom takes top, each armed with a sword, along with half of that big sphere, which not only makes for a decent shield, but also gives the 2 bosses powerful moves and attacks, able to zip around the arena by riding their semi-spheres, or use it to crash it down on you from above. This is also another fight where the bosses act as a bit of a tag team, taking turns to challenge you, sometimes choosing to throw you off guard by quickly switching around, or both taking you on at the same time together. Though obviously, being able to form a giant bowling ball of doom, they'll also rejoin their halves and spin around the place, rapidly hurtling around across the arena and bouncing around to generate explosive shockwaves. When they're not rolling around though, they're going to constantly alternate stances from attack to defense, helping each other out a bit more than the last pair of bosses, making those surprise attacks trickier to see coming. This makes it harder to take one of them out of the fight early, so you can focus on the other. But when you do eventually take one out, then the rest of the battle should be fairly simple. So the big bad boss at the end of the cave is a huge demon gorilla called the Bishui Golden-Eyed Beast, arguably the toughest creature you'll have met in the chapters so far, being the secret region's final boss. This guy's got a lot of things going for him, hitting hard and fast, being blessed with agility, and having a really meaty health bar to complement that daunting appearance. But probably the most notable thing about this boss is how it likes to play with fire. And if you thought the other bosses in this chapter were a little bit flame happy, this thing takes it to a whole other level. Aside from using loads of powerful ramming strikes that can cause fire to shoot up from the ground, it's also going to dash around the place leaving flame trails in its wake, turning its domain into a scorching inferno, constantly applying burn damage and practically forcing you to use that fireproof mantle to avoid becoming toast. It really doesn't help that the beast's lair just so happens to be halfway into a lava pit as well, so pretty much anywhere you step in this room is likely going to turn you into Guai Fawkes. and all that fire combined with the monster's beatdowns can rapidly drain your health if you're not careful. The beast's constant diving around and erratic maneuvers can also make it an awkward thing to pin down to deal some damage yourself. Though with it being open to getting staggered by your heavy focused attacks, you'll want to get as many hits in as you can whenever it's stunned, aided with the use of Immobilize to put a stop to its rampant charges. If you're really struggling to put an end to this monster's violent tantrum, you can lure it into burning down a nearby ice wall to take the fight into a frosty area, basically putting the boss into easy mode with it resorting to freeze attacks here instead. I didn't do this, hence the lack of footage in the background, but it just uses similar attacks as before, just with the different elemental type. Also not spamming fire all over the floor anymore like it did in the first room. Back onto the main story path now, and the next boss is actually our end of chapter finale. Though it's sort of split between two separate boss fights, with the first of them being against a cheeky little brat called the Red Boy, who's been deceiving you all along by disguising himself as his sister, the fox girl Ping Ping. The Red Boy vows to seek vengeance against Wukong by taking his anger out on the Destined One instead, armed with a long flaming spear and an appetite for mayhem. Being well skilled in hand-to-hand combat, this guy can hit you with a variety of attacks up close and over range, with many of them sending out blazing plumes which travel across the floor and through the air. Fire is, once again, one of the main things this boss likes to use against you, with that twirling spear often acting as a flamethrower, lighting the place up during combos. Though about halfway through the fight, the Red Boy is going to float up into the air, generate loads of imitations of himself, which one by one kamikaze down on you from above, forcing you to dodge all of those incoming clones while trying to avoid the burning residue you leave behind underground. The second half of the fight is going to be a lot more chaotic, with the Red Boy really showing off those Samadhi fire conjuring skills, launching flames pretty much everywhere, really trying his best to turn you into ash. You've obviously wound him up a bit, making him much more aggressive as a result. Hopefully you won't have taken too much damage in the first stage, as you're much more likely to get hit from now on. And if you've still got some mana save over in the bank of spells, then now will probably be a good time to use it. This guy's not exactly got tons of health, though he's still a very energetic target to hit. Defeating the Red Boy will give the giant Bull King a nice opportunity to give you the grieved body relic. But the mischievous little dude's gonna snatch it off you after faking his death and obtain the relic for himself, popping it into his gob to consume the power it possesses. Now looking like he's just eaten a Carolina Reaper, the Red Boy is going to explode into a huge blast of energy, allowing him to transform into a much more badass creature called the Yaksha King, a devilish looking thing with massive spikes protruding from his arms. This is where the real challenge begins, with the Yaksha King being much more powerful, being the true end of chapter boss, with the Red Boy fight literally there just to warm you up, for a much tougher one to follow. He doesn't resort to any burning attacks this time around, and is going to throw that fire-breathing staff away in exchange for those much deadlier elbow spikes. Zubajier is going to jump into the battle to give you a hand, but he's only really going to tickle the boss, who's going to relentlessly chase you down using vicious swiping combos up close. The Yaksha King generally prefers to slice you up in close quarters, but does have a few sneaky moves over range too, one of which causes lots of spiky grass to shoot up from the ground, and another where he lobs spinning projectiles at you from afar. But the one attack you really need to worry about is when the boss extends his spikes to a ridiculous size and swishes them around to deal devastating amounts of damage, with this one savage combo being enough to completely blitz through your entire health pool, and being such a fatal set of moves, I'd highly advise saving for mana for Cloud Step, just in case it catches you out. This is the main devious trick you'll need to be wary of, as the rest of the fight is fairly straightforward. That doesn't mean he can't dish out lots of damage quickly, but so long as you respect his power in close ranges, a lot of his spike flurries and blade slashes shouldn't be too hard to read. The Yaksha King can grab you near the end of the fight to beat the living crap out of you. And although this might seem like he's somehow won, that doesn't mean that the war is over, still being able to finish the fight after this sequence, to reclaim that stolen relic. That's it for this one folks, I do hope you enjoyed the guide, please give me a like if you did. And if you want to see all the other Black Myth Wukong bosses from the other chapters, make sure you check out the playlist on my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in that next one.